From Studio 1A in Tampa, Florida, comes a talk show that really feels your pain and tells you like it is. We love America and all that freedom-loving Americans want to protect. Live from coast to coast and on your radio, it's For the People with Keith Allen.
We'll help you survive this thing called life. We're for the people. Whatever your source of stress or strife, for the people is there.
Well, hello, Mr. and Mrs. America. I am Keith Allen, and proudly welcoming you into this Friday's edition of For the People for September the 14th, 2018, and it is dry currently in Tampa, Florida, though we have the possibility of some thunderstorms, and I'm certain the Palmetto State wishes it was just a matter of, well, some thunderstorms, but this hurricane that really looks amazingly huge, amazingly beautiful, as some meteorologists say, is the perfect shape and the perfect size, and this thing is just a mammoth of a storm. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. Finally made landfall, if you didn't hear already. It was near Wrightsville Beach around 7:15 this morning, and a lot of power outages and a lot more on the way. 450,000, and it's predicted that millions more probably are going to be without power before it's all said and done. But Duke Energy was telling Fox News there in that area in North Carolina, in Wilmington, actually, 3 million customers represent about 75% of their customers in the Carolinas, and they're predicting that 75% could lose power of their clients. So the company has enlisted more than 10,000 employees, including 1,700 workers from the Midwest, 1,200 from Florida, from our Sunshine State here, to help in the relief efforts to get the power turned back on as quickly as possible. There's nothing worse than sitting in the dark, folks. You know, we've done shows on preparedness, and we've done it for years just to get people's minds going. Generators, really, when it's all said and done, are cheap. What you want to remember, if you buy a generator, don't rely on gasoline. Because if you run out of gas and your gas station has gas, but you can't get it pumped because they have no power, then you have a generator that can't generate. So what do? A guy named Chuck Harder turned me on to some survival stuff back in the early 90s. And he had a giant propane tank that he ran his entire household on. And the radio network that I used to work for, the People's Radio Network. And yeah, you can bury those things in your yard because, you know, you might consider it an eyesore, or you just put them in the back of your house, side of your house, build a little fence around it. But you can have a couple of them. You just fill them up, and it'll go and go. It'll have plenty of propane, not only to run the generator, but also to heat your home if you should need that. But propane is wonderful, and it stores very, very well. And that's the best way to go if you're going to want to get a generator. And there's a lot of great generator companies out there that have some terrific deals, but that's the best thing that you can do is have a generator. These inverters, they're terrific for a minute. I see these things on Home Shopping Network, and I know better because I've been through hurricane after hurricane here in Florida. And luckily, we've dodged the bullet. We've got a lot of wind, but we lost power last year. And, you know, inverters, running a lamp, maybe a television for a minute, it's not ideal. Imagine having air conditioning and being able to watch the television, having your modem up. That's what a generator will do. Anyway, I'm sold on the generator thing, and I would have to say as many people that, from what I understand here, that stayed to ride the storm out must have a generator. I'm just kind of thinking, if you stayed, how many people there in North Carolina? I would like to hear from you on Facebook. If you can, yeah, exactly. If you can, you got your internet going. It's just For the People Show on Facebook, and it's hashtag Talk to Keith Allen on Twitter. But Hurricane Florence, according to the chief of FEMA, Brock Long. He says Florence is performing exactly as predicted. And what is he talking about? He says with the storm surge and the flooding, he says they're the dangers. That remains, even though downgraded from, a 4 to a 1, this thing is a huge rainmaker, and the storm surge still a problem, and for the next couple days at least. He says because of the expansive wind field and the slowdown in the speed, we're seeing a lot of flooding. Inland towns such as New Bern, North Carolina, experiencing heavy flooding, and I saw a lot of video coming from that, a lot of locals that have staged, shot video. It's overwhelming to see the streets of New Bern. It looks like an ocean on Main Street, literally. He says as a result of several search and rescue operations that will continue. There's people on the roof, people being rescued as we speak. Long said not only is FEMA that's going to respond to the storm, but a partnership that reaches from the federal government all the way to the state and local levels. Meanwhile, the storm surge has the highest potential to kill the most people and cause the most destruction. And that's Long's point. And it's a point that people don't get is what it does not only during the storm, but even after the storm. Because the water has to go somewhere, and it will find a way. Unfortunately, it can overtake you so quickly that you don't even see it coming. He says, if I remember, high tide is going to be between 11 and 12 today. So if you're listening to the program live, it's 11 and 12 Eastern time. He said, it's only going to get worse. Oh, yeah. High tide. Yeah, things rise. So people don't realize, he says, when they are asked to evacuate, it is primarily because of storm surge and coastal flooding. He says in Katrina, and this is a good point, and I'm glad he pointed this out, 250 people died from storm surge. Nobody that goes through it lives to tell about it. There is nobody to interview. And likely ever that have gone through storm surge. It just overtakes you that fast. You can't survive. Meanwhile, private companies, not FEMA, are in charge of restoring the power of people from all different states. And that's a beautiful thing. We got a great system here in the States. A lot of people have said, why couldn't we have serviced Puerto Rico? Well, we had power consortiums from all over the United States over there trying to get the grid back. It was just because of the disarray. And I vacation over there. I have family over there. Racon and Asco, Mayaguez, that part of the island, San Juan. You have to drive, of course, from San Juan all the way to Mayaguez. It's at least 3 hours and crazy driving on the highways there. And it is crazy driving. If you've ever driven in Puerto Rico, you're lucky if somebody yields to you nicely with a signal. Yeah, they're not all nuts, but there's a lot of crazy drivers. You just yield. They're just crazy over there, but they're enjoying themselves immensely. And it's still sad because the island is just devastated over there. But right now, there's just such urgency for people that are in these low-lying areas that have been warned. Now they're having to take their resources and go after these people, but that's what search and rescue operations do. But it takes away from people that really need the help, elderly people, people suffering from health issues, to try to get them for medical help. And, people will just do what we've seen it in Florida. So this is, it just drives me a little crazy because, again, to me, it takes away from what they're trying to do ultimately. And that is to, sensible people, and if you got a problem, they can go ahead and take that first, but have to rescue people on the roofs that told them before this is going to happen. But, they didn't believe what the weatherman said. And all the locals were saying, this is not overhype. This is real. Real stuff here. Was in the wall. Calm Wrightsville Beach North Bridge had calm winds about 50 miles per hour, now backside east-northeast, gusting 40 to 70. So it went from 50 to 70 miles an hour, and up to 90 miles per hour right now, according to the National Hurricane Center. So that was the gust, and extended outward up to, 80 miles from the storm center? Yeah. You should see my studio. I mean, I got display after display of videos of flooding, of houses, of damages, hotels that have been damaged. It's just it's a mess over there. If you got anybody over there in the Carolinas, they could be sitting in the dark, so if you don't hear from them, but hopefully some of them have generators or have charged their cell phones enough, because then you have to think about cell towers. They might have enough. 24 to 48 hours is average, from what I understand, for most cell towers. So you probably still can get a hold of your loved ones. I have friends in Colombia, and they're riding it out. They're going to see some winds, 50, 60 miles an hour. Probably the worst of it tomorrow in Colombia. But the north, obviously, experiencing the worst issues right now. We're talking about Hurricane Florence, leaving hundreds of thousands without power in North Carolina. It's a big storm. And another storm, if you have been following this online or have heard about it, in the Philippines, they have evacuated thousands ahead of a super typhoon, and it's called Mangkhut, and it's a pretty serious one. And this one is a Cat 5, a super typhoon, as they're calling it, and it threatens millions of people in the north of the country. Mangkhut is stronger than Hurricane Florence, which is currently lashing the U.S., and this is according to CNN. Luzon Island, early on Saturday, current wind speeds 285 kilometers per hour, which is really 180 miles an hour. And this massive storm is a Cat 5 hurricane, and it prompts alerts from East and Southeast Asia. Second storm Typhoon Barjet has also hit the region as well. So the Philippines have been taking a big beating. Coming up, we're going to be talking about some gas explosions, and this is just so weird, affecting hundreds of homes and businesses in Massachusetts. Big investigation. We're going to talk about that in addition to Hurricane Florence. But I got to tell you, preparation, my friends, is really peace of mind. You know, having life insurance and having funeral expense and having car insurance and house insurance and boat insurance, all that stuff's good. But you got to have food and water, have those essentials, bare minimal, get a little generator. And Generac, we've talked about that company. You know, I got generators from them. You get one of those puppies, and, you know, they start at $1,200. You can get little bigger ones for $2,000-$3,000, but really, to run everything in your house, don't miss a bump. You can control it on your smartphone when you're not home. Save for a generator if you're nickeled and dimed and you just don't have a lot of money. If you're elderly, if you're on CPAC, if you're on, you know, you just can't be in humidity. It just doesn't do your body good. You got to have that air conditioning cranked up, man. I mean, a lot of people just can't handle the heat. They got to have AC. I mean, I'm so conditioned to the AC when I sleep, I don't know if I could sleep without AC. Those for the islands, man, they're good. They're good to go. But I have met many people in Puerto Rico that have AC. So it's not everybody. But, you know, the elderly, you know, if you're older, you just don't fare through things as well. So, again, it's a good idea. The other thing is the FEMA director pointed out, I think this is very good, and this is where we should have the fancy radio with a great price tag on it today, is to have yourself an emergency radio with NOAA weather radio to be able to get AM and FM. And they sell these crank radios where you can crank them up and generate your own power in case, you know, the battery gets fried in the component. Do you ever have an electronic component where you haven't used it for a while and you check the battery and it's got the acid all spilled all over it, and then the terminals are burned out and doesn't work? Well, they kind of thought through this on these wind-up radios, and they have flashlights as well, but you get one of those and you just wind it for a little bit, charges, and then you can pick up all these stations. But that's the only source of information that sometimes people can get, and to get the alerts, especially if a big surge or, you know, a dam breaks, what have you, you can be warned to just get out of that general vicinity. And I think that's the best move. So make sure you have these things. If you don't have them, get them. And you can